"If you dance this waltz, I'll marry my son to you." Cyrus Blackwood, the most powerful cattle baron in the territory, sneered loudly enough for all the landowning elite to hear, pointing his whiskey tumbler at the black woman who had just stumbled and dropped a silver tray on the polished floorboards of the grand ballroom. The deafening sound of shattering sherry glasses silenced the 200 guests at the inaugural ball for Blackwood Cattle Company's new manor. All eyes turned to Elara Vance, 35, who had been working as a hired maid at the grand estate for just 3 weeks. "Father, you're being ridiculous," whispered Elias Blackwood, 28, his face flushed with shame at his father's cruel spectacle. But Cyrus, a man drunk on power and the fine Kentucky bourbon he'd been drinking all night, completely ignored his son's protest. "No, no, let me finish," Cyrus continued, striding to the center of the room as if holding court. "This girl obviously lacks the coordination for even simple service. How about we test if she can even move to the beat?" Elara remained kneeling, picking up the glass shards with trembling hands, but her eyes held a look no one there could decipher. It wasn't humiliation or fear. It was a deep calm, as if she were weighing every word, every cruel laugh, every look of contempt. "Mr. Blackwood," the event foreman intervened discreetly, "perhaps it would be better nothing." Cyrus cut him off, gesturing dramatically to the string quartet. "Play a waltz. If she can dance better than my wife, I'll marry my son to her on the spot. Just imagine, the heir to the Blackwood fortune marrying the help." A wave of cruel laughter echoed through the hall. Some ladies fanned themselves, pretending to be shocked, but their eyes glinted with amusement. The men shook their heads, seeing it as a perfectly acceptable, if crude, form of entertainment. Elara finally stood, wiped her hands on her apron, and looked directly at Cyrus Blackwood. For a moment that felt like an eternity, she remained silent, making a decision that would change not only this night but the entire balance of power in that room. "I accept," she said, her clear voice cutting through the air like a sharp blade. The hall fell completely silent. Even the string quartet lowered their bows, confused. Cyrus blinked, certain he had misheard. "What did you say, girl?" he asked, his arrogance momentarily shaken. "I said, I accept your challenge," Elara repeated, now with a subtle smile that sent an odd shiver down the spines of some of the guests. "But when I dance better than your wife, you will keep your word," even if it was given in jest. At that moment, as the crowd mocked and laughed even louder, no one noticed the familiar gleam in Elara's eyes. The same gleam that had once mesmerized audiences on the grandest stages of Europe, before a single night of tragedy changed the course of her life forever. What was about to happen in that ballroom would prove that underestimating someone is the most costly mistake a man can ever make. Cyrus's wife, Eleanor Blackwood, a 50-year-old woman known for teaching cotillion to the daughters of the territory's elite, approached with a venomous smile. "Darling, do you really believe I need to lower myself to compete with this?" she said, gesturing dismissively at Elara. "Don't be modest, Eleanora," Cyrus boomed. "You won the ribbon at the governor's ball last year. That ought to be more than enough for this little demonstration." Elara watched silently, her mind flying back 15 years to when she was known as Elara Moreau, the principal dancer of the renowned Paris Opera Ballet. She remembered the nights when entire opera houses rose to their feet, shouting bravo. The reviews that compared her to the greatest dancers in history. It had all ended on one tragic night, a special performance for European royalty, a stagecoach accident on a dark, rainy road home, 3 months in a feverish haze, and a cruel awakening. Her legs would never be the same. The doctor said she would be lucky to walk without a limp. "Dance professionally?" "Impossible, Elias," said Cyrus, turning to his son. "Go fetch that new photographic apparatus. I want to record this moment for posterity. The day a serving girl tried to pass herself off as a lady at my ball." Elias hesitated, his discomfort plain. "Father, this has gone too far. The woman was just doing her job." "The woman," Cyrus cut him off sarcastically, "accepted the challenge. Now she will entertain us. Or would you rather I mention your outstanding debt at the saloon to Miss Sinclair?" Elias's face went pale. Elara recognized the poison of blackmail. "Strike up the music." Cyrus ordered the quartet. "And place your wagers, gentlemen. $5 for those who bet on my wife. 10 for any man brave enough to wager on the Maid." Cruel laughter echoed again as some men actually began placing bets. Eleanora positioned herself in the center of the floor, executing a few theatrical curtsies. "You know," Cyrus said, approaching Elara with a wicked smile. "When you lose, and you will lose, I want you to get on your knees and apologize for wasting everyone's time. And then, obviously, you're dismissed." It was then that something shifted in Elara's eyes. "Mr. Blackwood," she said with a calmness that sent a chill through the room. "When I win, and I will win, I expect you to keep your word about the marriage. But I want something more." Cyrus raised an eyebrow, amused. "Oh? She makes demands now? Amuse me. What else could you possibly want? I want you to admit, in front of all your guests, that you judged a woman wrongly based on the color of her skin and the station she holds. And I want a public apology." William Blackwood laughed loud and long. "You have spirit, I'll grant you that. Very well, I accept. But when you make a fool of yourself, you'll leave this ranch not only without a job, but without a shred of dignity, miss," a low voice said beside her. Elara turned to see a weathered black man in his 60s, the head steward. "I'm Silas. I've worked for this family for 20 years, he approached discreetly. "I saw you dance once," he murmured, so low only she could hear. 15 years ago. At the Orpheum Theatre in New Orleans. Elara Moreau, they called you. The star of Paris. I was an usher there, before the war." Elara's heart pounded. "They said you vanished in the accident," Silas continued, his eyes full of admiration. "The papers said you'd never dance again." "The papers said many things," Elara replied, her voice steady. "Not all of them were true, Silas," she said, making a decision. "I need a favor. After I dance, no matter what happens, I need you to be my witness. To tell everyone what you just told me." He nodded. "Start the music," Eleanora ordered. The string quartet began a classical waltz, and Eleanora danced alone, executing competent but predictable steps that earned polite applause. "Well done, my dear," said Cyrus. "Now for our main event." Elara walked slowly to the center of the floor. "The same tune," she said simply to the musicians. The first bars of the waltz echoed, and Elara began to move. Instead of hesitant steps, she rose with a grace that seemed to defy the very dust in the air. Her first movements were subtle, but as the music swelled, so did she. Each step became more fluid, each turn more precise, each gesture charged with a deep emotion that began to mesmerize everyone. Cyrus Blackwood stopped laughing. Eleanora's smile vanished. "My God," someone murmured. She's magnificent." Elara performed a sequence of pirouettes that would challenge a seasoned professional, followed by a grand jeet that lifted her into the air with impossible lightness. This wasn't a society waltz. This was classical ballet. As the music reached its climax, Elara performed a series of fouettes, continuous turns on one leg that left the entire audience speechless. The music ended, and she finished in a pose of powerful, dignified stillness. The silence that followed was absolute. Then, one person began to clap, then another. Within seconds, the entire hall was on its feet, applauding with a roar that shook the rafters. Cyrus Blackwood was pale as a ghost. It was then that Silas stepped forward, his voice ringing with authority. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced. "Allow me to present to you Miss Elara Moreau, former principal soloist of the Paris Opera Ballet." The name echoed through the hall like a gunshot. "Impossible," Eleanora stammered. Elara Moreau vanished. "They said she was crippled." "Clearly," Elara said, her voice calm and strong. "The rumors of my demise were greatly exaggerated, Mr. Blackwood," Silas said, stepping forward. "You gave your word. I believe this entire room can attest that the condition has been met." Elias approached Elara. "Miss Moreau," he said, bowing his head. "I wish to publicly apologize for my father's behavior. It was inexcusable." "Elias, you shut your mouth." Cyrus exploded. "Mr. Blackwood," Elara said calmly, "I believe we have a marriage proposal to discuss. A man of your standing always keeps his word, does he not? You must be mad if you think I'll honor a drunken jest." Cyrus growled, but it was a public wager, with clear terms, made before 200 witnesses," Elara replied. "Now you must decide if you are a man of your word, or if your reputation is worth less than your prejudice." Elias moved closer to Elara. Miss Moreau, he said, if you will permit me, I would like to honor my father's word. Not because I am forced to, but because any man would be honored to be wed to a woman of your talent and dignity. Elias, if you do this, you are out of this family, out of this business, out of everything. Cyrus roared, then so be it, Elias replied, extending his hand to Elara. Some things are more important than money, father. Things like integrity. Elara looked at the outstretched hand, then at Cyrus. Mr. Blackwood, 15 years ago, the world decided I had no value because I was no longer perfect. Tonight, you tried to humiliate me for the color of my skin and the work I do. But I have learned that true nobility comes not from land or titles, but from how we treat our fellow human beings. She turned to Elias. Your son seems to have learned that lesson, despite you then, she smiled. As for the proposal, I will accept a dinner with him. But marriage, well, that is something two people decide together, out of love and respect. Not from a humiliating wager. The audience erupted in applause again, this time for her wisdom. Cyrus Blackwood, having lost everything in that moment, stormed out of the hall. The story of that night spread like a prairie fire. Cattle King dethroned by dancing Maid became the headline in papers from St. Louis to San Francisco. Within a week, Cyrus Blackwood's biggest cattle contracts were pulled. Father, Elias said, finding him alone in his study. The Board of Ranchers has voted. You have until noon to sign over control of the company, or they will ruin you completely. You did this, Cyrus murmured. You betrayed me. No, Elias replied calmly. You betrayed yourself. 6 months later, the Elara Vance School for Arts and Letters opened in the nearby town, funded by donations that poured in from all over the country. Elias Blackwood, now running a reformed and respected ranching operation, was the first and largest donor. Cyrus Blackwood was last seen working as a hired hand on a small, dusty ranch in Arizona, a ghost of the arrogant man he once was. You know what impresses me most? Silas said during the school's opening, watching Elara teach a class of diverse, smiling children. It wasn't just a victory over prejudice. It was a lesson in how true grace responds to cruelty. Elara, once again recognized as a great artist, smiled. Sometimes, she said, we have to lose everything to discover who we really are. And some people have to lose everything to learn who they should never have been. Elias approached, carrying a bouquet of prairie wildflowers. Ready for that dinner? He asked, offering his arm. Ready, she replied, accepting not only his arm but the new life she had built from the ashes of her old one. Her true revenge wasn't destroying Cyrus Blackwood. It was building something so beautiful and inspiring that his cruelty became an insignificant footnote in her triumphant story. She proved that when we face prejudice with dignity and answer hatred with excellence, we don't just win, we transform the world around us. What about you? Have you ever faced someone who tried to diminish your dreams based on prejudice? Her story proves that the best response to those who underestimate us is simply to be extraordinary.